Hello, this is DJ Cherryheadache for Off the Record at WKNC 88.1 FM HD1 Raleigh, and today I'll be joined by Owen Ashworth of Advanced Bass. Thank you so much for joining me, and I guess I'll just get right into it. Did you do any sort of music growing up, like any kind of bands that you were involved with then, or just like passive listening, anything like that?
Um, Playing music, no, I didn't take lessons. We had a piano in the house that I would just kind of plunk on. But I have a little brother, Gordon, who's 6 years younger than me, and he took the lessons, which I was always a little envious of. But I didn't really start playing music until I went away to college, and um, I had a few friends who had bands from back home, and we would just play music together. And then it wasn't until I got a little synthesizer that I started really writing songs. Um, but yeah, I don't know. For some reason, just writing songs and recording them on my own became just the most clear line towards creativity for me. I really just enjoyed the freedom of doing it on my own time and kind of learning how to write and sing and record and play kind of all in tandem. Like it was just kind of a really nice kind of like personal kind of meditative thing. So yeah, I don't know. Once I got started and I was probably around 20, um, it just became kind of part of my personal practice just to write and play these little songs on pianos.
Absolutely. And that's not the like only thing you also like draw, I see like on your Instagram. Was
Yeah.
that starting around the same time?
Well, as a kid I drew. I've always just kind of doodled, and it's nothing I do professionally, but it's just something that I just enjoy, and it's just kind of like, you know, just kind of a fun hobby. Yeah. It's just something
So,
I've kept doing through my life. Yeah.
yeah, in all of your albums, there's like seems like these like grand concepts, kind of like animal companionship, a lot about animals, and like so many of your songs like revolving around or mentioning different cities or all the like characters that are created within all of your music, which feels like almost kind of literary rather than
Mhm.
musical. Has it always been that way for you? Not just the purely autobiographical songs and kind of like this world building?
Yeah, it didn't start right away, but I mean, there was a point where I would start writing songs, and the way I write, the songs are usually pretty short and pretty concise and kind of follow. There is like usually kind of a little bit, I guess, probably more narrative driven than the way other people write songs. But yeah, it'll just kind of tell this one little story. Um, and I found it really satisfying to try to write companion songs where you're kind of expanding on a story, or you're learning more about the characters who are kind of peripheral in certain songs. So I guess by the time I made the third Casiotone album, which was called Twinkle Echo, I was starting to connect narratives between songs and kind of just trying to build like a bigger world. Um, yeah, and it started off just kind of being more for me, where it was just like a more interesting way to write, just to give a little more context and a little more meaning to what was happening in the songs. But yeah, I mean, not every record has been kind of written as like with like an overarching concept, but there are often either locations or characters or like events that kind of link some of the songs together. But yeah, animal companionship mostly takes place in Indiana, and yeah, mostly about dog ownership, or I don't know. And the concept of the song is all the dogs are named Walter on the album, but it's just coincidental that all these people have dogs named Walter, and they've come to that name for different reasons. But I just kind of like the idea of the dog being this almost like um supernatural kind of presence in the songs where nothing bad ever happens to the dogs, but and they are only like a source of like comfort. It was kind of the idea. Yeah.
That's nice. A very good change because, like, if you see a movie and there's a dog, it's always something's gonna happen. But
Yeah, when I started telling people that I was writing songs about people and their dogs, the first people kind of brace themselves, and I mean, just knowing that I kind of tend to write sad songs, like, "Oh no, what happens to the dog?" And so I was really intentional about nothing bad happening to any of the dogs because I have heard a lot of songs. If someone tells you they wrote a song about a dog, it usually means that the dog died. So it's like that's not what's going to happen on this record. Like I want this to be a very comforting listen for for pet lovers.
that's beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah, and like you said, like, a lot of your songs are pretty sad. Do
Mhm.
you find yourself as you've gone from Casiotone into advanced bass, like, trying to move away from some of the sadder sounds? Or is it I guess mainly what I'm asking is, like, has it always been that way, and will it always be that way, these kind of, like, sad but comforting songs?
Well, I'm not necessarily trying to write sad songs, but I think that's a lot of the songs that I grew up loving. Like I grew up with a lot of like soul music and country music in the house. Um, and the songs that kind of always felt the most relatable or comforting to me were kind of these, sadder stories where there's this sense of like longing or 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 some element of grief. Like I just somehow was really kind of gravitated towards those songs. Um, so yeah, I think there will always be kind of some element of that in everything I write, not by design so much. It's just that's kind of what I'm compelled to write about. And songs are lighter than others, and there's like there are funny parts, and there's some really wonderful things that happen in the songs alongside the dark stuff. But the new record that I just finished recording is a pretty intentionally pretty dark record. Like it's a little bit, I don't know, it's kind of about people living through traumatic events is kind of the intention where it's about I don't know. I wanted it to be songs about kind of people being resilient and kind of like the events that happen in people's lives that kind of shape who they become and how everyone kind of has these kind of like dark stories in their past. So that's kind of like the unifying theme of the record. And it was difficult to write. It was a little too sad for me sometimes, and I had to kind of put it down and come back to it after a while. But for some reason, these are the songs that I was really compelled to write this time. So I just had to take my time getting through it.
I understand that. And you said, like, feeling, like, compelled to create this. Is that how it's felt with previous albums, or is there more of, like, an intention behind creating them?
I think when I start writing an album, it'll usually just be I'll get an idea for a song and I'll just start kind of collecting songs and I'll typically notice some themes kind of arriving or just common elements in the songs. Um, like like animal companionship is such an easy example just because dogs are like the major theme. But I wrote a song about a friend of mine's dog, and then I wrote another song that mentioned a dog. And by the time I had written a third song that had a dog in it, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm obviously thinking about dogs a lot. Why? And but once I kind of recognize themes, I start analyzing for myself why I think I might be writing about these things, and then also maybe kind of writing towards that theme and trying to explore it a little deeper and seeing if there's enough there to make kind of the core of a collection of songs and then kind of build out from there. But usually about a third of the way through writing an album, I'll notice what I'm writing about, and then I'll more self-consciously be kind of writing towards a theme typically.
Yeah. So those through lines are just mainly, like, observed, and then you kinda, like, feed into them. But in a lot of songs, you, like, touch on different cities, like, I'm from Charlotte, so I think Charlotte immediately,
Oh, yeah.
but is there an intention behind these specific places?
Yeah, I mean, usually I think just making a reference to a specific place makes a song feel so much more tangible immediately. Like, if you can imagine where this is happening. I mean, I've always kinda had that experience. Like, there's I don't know who wrote it, but there's an old country song called, "The Streets of Baltimore" that, Bobby Bear and, um, uh, Graham Parsons and a few other I don't know, it's been covered a lot over the years, but just knowing that a song is about Baltimore, every time you go to Baltimore, you have this song in your I for personally, I mean, I think about that song every time I'm in Baltimore, and it just kind of enriches the experience of not only visiting place, but also listening to a song, to have been there and just to have, like, a really strong visual or memory attached to it, so I've always really loved that. There's a song called, "That's How I Got to Memphis" by Tom T. Hall, and again, every time I go to Memphis, I think about this song, and every time I hear the song, I think about the time I went to Memphis, and, I just think that's such a lovely thing to have just this, piece of media that you can experience in a place and will also just always remind you of when you're there, or I don't know, I think there's and it's if a place you've never been, it adds to the fantasy of this other location that you've never had a personal experience in, so, yeah, I think that's just I love that. And so it's a trick I keep doing again and again, and I also really like personally having a location in mind when I'm writing songs, and so, like, an album will often tend to have a lot of songs taking place in the same city because 'cause I'm writing about the same characters, or I'm really just trying to, like, populate a little town and imagine a community based on the characters in these songs. So, yeah, Indiana was kind of the focus for Animal Companionship. The album before that, Nephew in the Wild, has a lot of songs that mention Michigan, but I don't know. I was trying to describe like a few generations of a family and just like a little community of people interacting between the songs.
Yeah. When you Are these all places that, like, you've visited and had experiences in, or sometimes you just, like, think of a random place and you're like, "I could see this happening there"?
Yeah, not always. Sometimes it's just like in Charlotte, for example, it just I like the sound of that word and it seemed to fit really well in the song. And once I had an idea that, okay, the song is taking place in Charlotte, just having a location made it easier for me to imagine everything else that was happening. This new record that I just finished recording, it all takes place in an imaginary city called Richmond, and I picked that name because there are a ton of Richmonds across the country. Richmond, Virginia being the biggest, but there are Richmonds in almost every state. There's a Richmond in California near where I grew up, and so I kind of liked using Richmond, kind of like how they use Springfield on The Simpsons, where it's just kind of an American place, and they don't really make any specific reference to where in the US it is or what state, and I just kinda like the idea of there being, um, just a very common and recognizable city name that is kind of floating in this, just kinda in this abstract.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That also kinda goes in with, like, how universal it is that we all have, like, these bad things in our pasts that, like, you're writing about on this album. It's like, this could be literally anywhere, this could happen to anybody.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, Richmond is a place where terrible things happen on my record, and it's a lot of and I'm not trying to call out any Richmond in particular, but, yeah, I don't know. It's just the idea of there being a place in your past where all the bad stuff happened. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I know I used to live in East Bay in California, and a friend of mine lived in Danville,
Oh, yeah.
and there's a Danville that I, like, drove through in North Carolina, and I was like, "Oh, these are connected, there's a portal, same
Yeah.
place," but
I know the Danville you're talking about. I grew up in the Bay Area, and I had some friends in Danville too.
it was interesting. But, yeah, I'm very obsessed with that, like, the assigning these stories to these places because I know I definitely think of etiquette whenever I think about Nashville, and yeah, so that's awesome.
Thanks. Have you been to the Parthenon in Nashville?
No, I've never been, but
Okay.
it just, like, clouds all of my, like, opinions of it. Like, I
Yeah.
know Elliott Smith's Alameda, whenever I'd go to Alameda last year, I'd be
Mm.
like, I hear it in my head, so
Yeah, it's so cool.
and I guess, in the advanced bass albums, would you feel there's any, like, calling back to the Casiotone albums? Any, like, companion pieces, like, within those to, like, connect those projects, or do they feel very separate to you?
That's an interesting question. There are still some, Casiotone songs I play live occasionally, and, there is there's a character named Becky who's in the Advanced Space song Nephew, and the song is called Trisha Please Come Home. It's on the album Nephew in the Wild. And it's Becky is a name I use in a Casiotone song named Scattered Pearls. And I had imagined that it was this like the same Becky like years later in like a different chapter in her life. Um that's the only example I can really think of in an intentional connection. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think the way I write is so different than what I was doing by the end of Casiotone. But no, I'm not. That's I haven't tried to directly continue any stories with the exception of Becky showing up in two different songs.
So, would you say that those 2 projects feel very separate and, like, one of them very complete and the other one still happening, or
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I guess when I was doing Casiotone and it was by myself for the most part, I had friends would occasionally tour with me, but I was writing the songs. Um, it occurred to me that as I watched so many of my friends break up, that I would have to be really intentional about ending this project because I didn't feel like it was something that should go on forever. It's something, I started when I was 20 and it went for 13 years. And by the last few years, I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to end this because I would like to do something else. I liked the idea of just kind of a fresh start and writing and starting over with a new bunch of songs because I don't know, I kind of felt the baggage of carrying around so many years of Casiotone songs, and people would request songs that I'd written so many years before and didn't really feel a connection to anymore. And I just kept imagining how nice it would feel just to write a whole new set of songs that were about how I was feeling, or the kind of songs I wanted to be writing right in that moment. And it just seemed like such a good challenge to just start over completely, like throw everything out and figure out a whole new kind of world of music for myself. Um, so I wrote the last Casiotone album, Versus Children, knowing that it was going to be the last one. I kind of like the idea of writing a last album. And yeah, and then I toured for that record and I got very scared. And I was like, this has kind of been my main source of income. Like to end this project is like leaving a job and hopefully being able to find another one. Um, so I did one last very long Casiotone tour, um, and then took a little bit of time off, and then I started trying to write a whole new record for a whole new project and try to rethink it as much as I could. Advanced Spaces ended up being not terribly different than Casiotone in a lot of ways, but I think there is kind of a different mood. I think I'm in kind of a healthier place mentally. And I think there's just a more calming energy to Advanced Space than there was to Casiotone. I feel like my relationship with music is different. And I feel like I am writing for myself in a way that I didn't used to, where I'm just making exactly the kind of music that I want to hear. Um, One thing in particular I wanted to do differently with Advanced Bass is I had a few experiences playing in churches when I was in Casiotone, like in Europe and in England. There's some really beautiful old churches that people just will throw punk rock shows in, and they are, you know, designed to be naturally resonant, like really kind of, you know, beautiful sounding places where people get together and sing. Um, and Casiotone music sounded so terrible in churches. It was just like the rhythms were so fast that they got very jumbly in the natural reverb, and there are a lot of harsh tones that just would resonate in really unpleasant ways. So when I started advanced bass, I was like, I want to make music that would sound good to play in a church because I love being in those spaces. And I had seen so many friends play beautiful music in churches. I'm not a religious person at all. I think it's something about hearing music in a place designed for sound the way a church is like really special. Like it's I just wanted to be able to make my music sound beautiful in church. So that was absolutely a guiding principle of what I wanted the bass to do.
Absolutely, that's amazing. And so I guess with Casiotone, it felt like since this is like a 13-year project, there's like these expectations from people in the crowds kind of like to play those songs maybe you don't connect with anymore, or like to be exactly like what they've seen before, what they're used to. Do you feel those same kind of expectations now with advanced bass?
I'm sorry, could you ask that a slightly different way?
Yeah.
I'm sure I understand.
Okay, yeah. It seemed like what you were saying with having like a 13-year project like that
Yeah.
and people requesting songs that you'd written so long ago and maybe didn't connect with so much anymore, and there might have been, like, a certain kind of pressure there to be what people expected,
Mhm.
and I was wondering, I guess, first, like, if that resonates, and then also if it feels different now.
Okay. Oh, yeah, 'cause I'm at this point, I'm 13 years into advanced bass. Um, and do I feel the same distance from the early advanced bass songs that I felt from the early Casiotone songs by the end of Casiotone? Is that kinda what you're asking?
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say less so. I think going from age 20 to 33, I personally experienced just a lot of change, and those being the very first songs I wrote from the first song I wrote to the 200th song I wrote, there was a lot of change in the way I wanted to write songs and where I was in life. But going from 34 to I'm now 47, and we're talking about the 200th song I wrote to the 400th song I wrote, or something like that. There's less change, and I feel like I personally am a little more kind of settled into who I am at this point in my life. Like I feel like there have been fewer dramatic changes from the age 34 to 47. So I still feel like fundamentally the same person I was when I started advanced bass. And I find that music more relatable to perform, yeah, than when I was at the end of Casiotone. And people requesting songs I wrote when I was 21. And I was just like, oh my God, I feel like a phony singing the song. I just don't feel these feelings anymore. Um So yeah, I mean, there's some early Casiotone or advanced bass songs that I just don't love as much as the more recent ones. So, I'm not always eager to play every song from the advanced bass catalog, but for the most part, I stand behind all those songs. I and I feel like basically the same person I was as I was when I wrote them.
do you find it feels weird now when people ask you to play, like, those same songs you wrote when you were, like, 21?
It happens. I would say it's infrequent that people are familiar with songs that old at this point. I mean, Etiquette is the most popular of the Casiotone records, and people will request some of those songs occasionally. And there's some that I figured out new arrangements for. The other thing is, a lot of those Casiotone songs were written on very kind of specific electronic instruments, and I just don't know if I could pull them off in a satisfying way if someone is requesting a song that I think just the character of the arrangement seems to be like the thing that people love most about a lot of those songs. So they're just kind of I can't help them. I can't do that anymore. I just don't have the gear. and I honestly don't remember a lot of the words to those songs. But there are probably 20 Casiotone songs that I'm still comfortable enough playing, and I've kind of figured out new arrangements for it that I feel good about. I should mention this. In a couple months, I'm reissuing the third Casiotone record, Twinkle Echo, on my label, Arindel. Another big change with Advanced Bass is I started my own label called Arindel. So I've, if not released, then co-released all of the Advanced Bass stuff since this project started. So I feel like I have kind of just generally more control over what I'm doing, which feels really nice. But the Twinkle Echo, the 2003 Casiotone record, was released on a German label called Tom Lab that's not really doing stuff anymore, and it's been out of print for like a decade. So I'm finally getting around to reissuing Twinkle Echo after having already reissued the last two Casiotone records. Um, and coincidentally, at the same time I was preparing this project, I was cleaning out my basement and I found a box with all those old Casios, and I checked to see which ones still worked. And it just so happened that a lot of the gear that I recorded Twinkle Echo on still works. So I'm going to do one Twinkle Echo like record release show where I'm going to play all these songs I wrote, around 2002, 2003, just once, just to kind of honor the project and honor the fact that the record is available again, because enough people have asked for it where it seemed like a good time to reissue it. So yeah, I'm fully engaging with the material, and I'm gonna just play them at this one show. So that'll be fun. But it'll kind of feel like those Halloween shows where bands perform as other bands. I kind of feel like I'm doing that. But yeah, I think it'll be nice.
Yeah, how do you think, like, going into a show like that, do you like, feeling like you're performing as a different band, do you feel like there's something you can do to make it feel more, like, true to who you are now?
I th- I'm kind of intentionally not doing that. I feel like I'm just going to play these songs, and I will acknowledge the fact that fully acknowledging that these are old songs, and this is kind of just a nostalgic thing that I'm doing. And I wouldn't want to try to do a show where I'm playing advanced bass songs together with these old Twinkle Echo songs, but just in celebration for what the thing is. And this is a reissue of a 21-year-old record, and you're either interested or you in it or you aren't. Like I have some friends in their late 30s or 40s who are very excited about this idea, who are traveling in to see the show, and I feel like we're just all on the same space in the same page. Like this is going to be a very weird throwback to another time, and we're all 21 years older at this point. But yeah, no, in that context where that I know everyone knows exactly what's going on with it, I feel like it'll be a fun one-off.
Yeah. That really makes me think of, have you seen I See the TV Glow?
I have, yeah.
That kinda makes me think of that, just, like, the nostalgia for something that meant everything at one point, and you just
Yeah,
feel kinda like you're on some different stuff now.
yeah. Yeah, I like that movie. It was very, alarming at the moment in the movie they acknowledged that the main character is named Owen. I went and saw it on tour with my friend Karima, and as soon as the name Owen was said, like, Karima just, like, turned towards me and started laughing, and it was I don't know, something about that character being named Owen I found so distracting and so personal. Like, I really took it personal. Uh, yeah, I like that movie.
And I guess also on the reissue of Twinkle Echo, the, like, vinyl reissue, do you feel more of a connection to things like physical media like that rather than just, like, a remastered Spotify album or something?
Yeah, I mean, I started the label Arindel because I was so interested in the actual, like, physical production. Like, I really love vinyl. It's not the only format that I release on Arindel, but it's kind of the ideal for me. Um, and honestly, like, the cover of that record is painted by my friend Heidi Anderson, and I always thought it was such a good-looking record, and people have commented that, like, they love the art and they want a copy of it because they wanna have that painting in their house. So Yeah, something about I think a record in particular, it's just like an art object. Um, and I put a lot of work into making sure the records look really beautiful, and, like, I have close relationships with the people who do the printing and the designing, so that's a big part of the passion for me. Yeah, I record design is a, a big part of what I love about making albums, and not just, a single that's gonna be available on the internet, but, like, an album is like a it's like a complete statement, and I want it to be like a full experience with, there's a cover you can stare at while you listen to it, and you can flip it over and, read the lyrics, or, the liner notes or whatever. Like, I like how immersive an experience just listening to a record can be.
Absolutely. And so with Arindel, when you're bringing people on with it, what kind of things do you look for?
Oh, I was just talking this with a friend the other night. My friend Sam Sodomsky, who's a is a music writer, but also a songwriter in New York. He just flew to Chicago, and we did a show together. Yeah, we had a long converse. We talked about Arundel a lot more than I usually talk about Arundel. Um, when I started the label, my intention is that it was mostly just going to be to release my own stuff. And my brother had some music that he was excited to release at the time, and so I released one of his albums. And once I kind of had the infrastructure in place, like I had relationships with, everyone in the production side, and kind of had built up a little press list, and had just, this is my house behind me. This is the room that I run Arundel out of. And once you have a room like this in your house, it just seems like, well, yeah, I guess I can help friends who need records out. Like, I kind of have built up. I have a label. Like, why not? So I started just putting out records for close friends, and a couple of things were kind of unexpected successes, and were selling well enough that, oh, I have more money to put out more records. And I don't know, I started getting demo submissions, much to my surprise. It wasn't really my intention with the label, is there to be an open call for other artists. But mostly who I've ended up working with are other artists that I play with on tour, like bands that I will play shows with, or musicians who I've had kind of built a personal friendship with, who I feel like we can kind of see eye to eye, and there's, we're respectful of each other, and we want, I don't know. We having being part of a musical community that is respectful and just going towards a common good, um, and want Arundel to be like a really healthy, nurturing place for other artists. My friend Sam mentioned that humility seemed to be a factor linking all of these artists. I feel like it's a lot of like very humble, and um, but a lot of these artists record themselves, and even though it's like a lot of kind of different genres, I think that there's a really kind of homemade and very personal quality to all of these, everything I put out. And um, I think it's also important that people are just excited about being part of Arundel and are supportive of the other artists. And it feels like just like a healthy exchange, and like a, supportive network. So that's kind of what it's turned into. Um, Yeah, it's all my favorite music, honestly. I mean, I'm the amount that I of music that I just listened to that Arundel came out on is, I think it's indicative that, this is my taste. It's what you're hearing with a record label.
Absolutely. That's very important. I think
Yeah.
the liking what you're helping put out, and then also I think it's very important now to have a lot of those good, nurturing, healthy connections within the
Cool.
industry.
Yeah, I want it to feel sustainable, and I want this to feel like, I don't know. I am the growth, like capitalistic growth, is not really the intention with the rental so much as it just keeping it going and feeling it. It just to be a supportive community that artists can return to. Um, Yeah, and kind of small by design, keeping it small by design has been an important element of that.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I guess, well, that kinda goes into one of my final questions for you about, like, what you listen to in your personal time.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, a lot of the Arundel stuff, I love. I just put together a playlist for a music blog called, Ugly Hug, and it was a challenge not to include any Arundel stuff, honestly. But, I do listen to a lot of just old country music. Um, a lot of, stuff from Nashville from the '50s through '70s. George Jones is one of my favorite singers, and I listen to a lot of George Jones. That's kind of like if when I'm by myself, because I feel like nobody else wants to listen to George Jones with me. But he's, I think, the best singer who ever lived. He's just my top favorite. Um, but I listen to um, a lot of electronic music, like old electronic music. There's this movement of called what's called cosmic music from the '70s in Germany. Like Kraftwerk were kind of part of that world. There's a band called Harmonia, a band called Cluster. Um, a lot of kind of like ambient experimental electronic music from 50 years ago. I'm kind of obsessed with. But I don't know, a lot of singer-songwriter stuff too. Um, I don't listen to music as much as I used to, as I find I spend a lot of time thinking about music, and I'll go for a drive, and I'll go hours without listening to anything, but I will be thinking about songs, and I often find that almost as rewarding an experience. So I don't know why that is. I feel like I'm taking in less music than I used to, but I find I'm thinking about music a lot. Um, really liked the last Cindy Lee album, Diamond Jubilee. Um, and when I was on tour this summer with my friend Karima Walker, we listened to that in the car an awful lot. Yeah.
Do you feel yourself drawn I'm gonna back up actually. So, yeah, like, being more intentional about what like, how you're consuming music. I was curious, I guess, if you feel drawn to other projects that, like, feel like they're part of, like, this greater world, like we talked about earlier with the songs about places where you can, like,
Yeah.
really feel it like that. Is that something that attracts you to certain artists or songs?
Sometimes I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll hear music that just it comes to you with no context, and the mystery can be really exciting and to wonder about. I mean, I listen to a lot of music from other countries too, and I listen to a lot of singers who are singing in other languages. And I was just talking. I have a 12-year-old kid. We were just talking about this. There's this Japanese song that they were excited to play me, and it's all in Japanese. And I was like, "Do you know what they're singing about?" And they didn't know the lyrics, but they were just kind of. They told me what they thought the song might be about, just based on like the feeling of the music. And we were talking about how when you listen to music from a different place and you're just responding to the sound of the music and the emotion in a singer's voice, you can project so much onto that. And I think that can be a really thrilling way to listen to music where you kind of can fill in a lot of the blanks. So taking music with like less context, I think can be really exciting. But what I tend to do is when I find music like that is I'll start to do research and I'll figure out where someone's from and kind of get more of their life story. And then you'll start looking for other music that's happening at the same time, or you'll find out like, oh, this is this the songwriter also did this, or this producer also recorded these other bands at the same time. And I love doing that research and kind of building out a world like that. I read a lot of music biographies actually, and I love just knowing the context that music came from. Um, yeah, and just to be able to attach a geographical location and point in history that music came from. I don't think it's essential to enjoying music, but I think it just enriches the experience to know more about the context. Uh, yeah, no, I think I kind of go down a lot of rabbit holes. I watch a lot of documentaries. I read a lot of memoirs. And I just read a book about Creedence Clearwater Revival, who were a band that went to the rival high school that my parents went to. And the early version of Creedence, when they were called the Blue Velvets, they played it like my parents' homecoming dance. My parents have really, I mean, I grew up listening to Creedence, the same Creedence tape in my dad's car all the time. And I remember my parents telling me the story of like, yeah, we met, met John Fogerty, and him and the band played at our high school. And then by the time Creedence blew up, they were already rooting for him because they knew that they were like local El Cerrito guys. Um, so Creedence always reminds me of my parents. So reading that book and reading about all the East Bay of California. So I mean, I have a really personal connection to just for that reason. But I love knowing the situations and the people and the everything going on behind the music can be just a nice history lesson too.
Absolutely. Like putting it in context and like being able to relate to it like that makes it so much better, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that might about wrap up every question I had. Was there anything you wanted to talk about or anything you wanted to expand on?
I should just probably mention, yeah, the Twinkle Echo reissue's coming out on Arindel in beginning of August, and then fingers crossed the new Advanced Bass album will be out um, end of the year on Run for Cover and Arindel Records. Run for Cover is the label in Boston that co-released Animal Companionship. They've been really wonderful partner um, to work with. Yeah, they're putting out the new album. The new album is called Horrible Occurrences, and yeah, it's all done. I just got to finish mixing it and then send it to vinyl production. But hopefully, by December it'll be out.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I was freaking out, but
Oh, well, thanks for asking, and thank you for the thoughtful questions. It was, yeah, really nice
of
talking to
course.
you.
Yeah, great talking to you too. Thank you so much for listening. Again, this was DJ Cherryheadache with WKNC 88.1 FM HD1 Raleigh, joined by Owen Ashworth from Advanced Space. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.